So our topic tonight, folks, making animals real, helping people understand animal sentience. Tonight, we have brought together powerhouse biology, neuroscience, and veterinary experts in the field of animal sentience and cognition to help us help the world understand better the complexity, intelligence, and deep emotional lives of non-human animals. So whether you do your animal advocacy via social media or in the courtrooms or in campaigns or in conversations, I want you tonight to listen up for some pieces here that could really help you to wake people up, again, to the rich inner lives of the animals our society woefully underestimates. So Kirsten, can I have you spotlight us? And while we are spotlighting our panel, I'm going to start introducing them. We're going to start off Lori Marino, neuroscientist and an expert in animal behavior intelligence, who was on the faculty of Emory University for 20 years. She is the founder and president of the Whale Sanctuary Project. So excited about. She was the director of the Camella Center for the Scholarship-Based Animal Advocacy. Lori's scientific work focuses on the evolution of the brain and intelligence in dolphins and whales, as well as primates and farmed animals, and on the effects of captivity on wildlife. She's published over 140 peer-reviewed scientific papers, book chapters, and magazine articles. In 2001, she co-authored a groundbreaking study the first conclusive evidence for mere self-recognition in dolphins. I'm sure many of you have heard of that study. It was groundbreaking. Lori also works at the intersection of science and animal law and policy, having been an expert witness and advisor for several legal efforts for animal rights and protection, including the Non-Human Rights Project and the Canadian Senate Bill S-203, which we know well here, banning the dolphins and whales for entertainment in S-203. Lori has also appeared in several films and television programs, including documentary Fish and Seaspiracy. Lori, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
So good to have you, Lori. And honestly, usually I cut down bios tremendously, but I can't for this crew. You got to know what they have been doing with their lives. It's amazing. So I'm going on to Jonathan. Jonathan Balcombe here is a biologist with a PhD in ethology, the study of animal behavior. His books include Pleasurable Kingdom, Second Nature, The Exultant Ark, and What a Fish Knows, a New York Times bestseller now available in 6 years. His latest book for grown-up, Fly, won the 2020 Outdoor Book Award for Natural History. Children's storybook, Ava, A Boy and a Fish, was published in November 2021. Before focusing on writing books, he worked for several animal protection organizations, a medical technology firm, and as a professional editor. He lives in Southern Ontario. I can just throw a stone at him and hit him, where he spends his spare time enjoying biking, baking, birding, Bach, I love it, and trying to understand the neighbors. Jonathan, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so good to have you here. And Kirsten is dropping in all sorts of links that I'm talking about. So as I'm talking about it, it's there for people to go and check out. Okay, up next we have Elena Contreras, who is a veterinarian with interests in chronic stress and animal welfare, veterinary ethics, animal behavior, feline stress, and fear-free practices. She's a faculty member at the Long Island University of Veterinary Medicine, where she teaches animal welfare and behavior. She also assists in the teaching of veterinary ethics to first and second year veterinary students at Colorado State University College of Veterinary. Elena is currently an advisor for Phoenix Zones Initiative, and she's also on the Animal Welfare Committee of the New York State Veterinarian Medical Association. Has authored and co-authored numerous publications in the veterinary and other fields. And one of her favorites is a recently published article in the Journal of Animal Ethics about the convenient disregard of the lab, which she co-authored with one of her mentors, the deeply departed Dr. Bernie Rowland. Elena, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here.
And you brought your friend the chicken friend with you behind you. Love it. And last but certainly not least, we have Marc Bekoff, who is a professor emeritus of ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Colorado, Boulder. He's published, get this folks, 31 books, won many awards for his research, behavior, animal emotions, compassionate conservation, and animal protection. He's also worked closely with Jane Goodall and is a former Guggenheim Fellow. He also works closely with inmates at the Boulder County Jail. We love that intersectional work. Marc's latest books are The Animal's Agenda, Freedom, Compassion, and Coexistence in the Human Age with Jessica Pierce, Canine Confidential, Why Dogs Do What They Do, and Unleashing Your Dog, a field guide to giving your canine companion the best life possible, also with Jessica Pierce. And he also publishes regularly for Psychology Today. Marc and Jessica's most recent book, A Dog's World, Imagining the Lives of Dogs in a World Without Humans, was published by Princeton University Press in October 2021. Because he needed to be even more of an overachiever. In 2006, Marc won the Masters age-graded Tour de France. Are a miracle. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to.
And is you ride up every day with your bike? That's what I'm expecting of you.
Oh, pretty much. For sanity, for sure.
And I hope you all notice that every one of these people has a PhD, and so I am in trouble. No PhD here, folks, so please bear with me.
You're lucky.
Yeah. Okay.
Mild, higher, and deeper.
I'm just keeping it real here, folks. So I think the first thing I want to start with is it is hard to imagine in this day and age that there are actually people still disputing this, but let's get it on the table right off the bat. Is the science clear that animals can think and feel? Okay, I want to, and I think, you know what, let's start with, let's dive in. Is the science clear? Is it clear? Is it murky? What is it?
Who's starting?
You starting?
You're going to start, Marc. I'm putting it over to you, Tour de France.
Sure, I'll start because I sent out to the group on Tuesday an article that was published in Science News called What Do Animals Feel? And it's inarguably one of the worst articles I've ever read. And if it were published 150 years ago, I think Charles Darwin also would have rolled over in his grave. I guess he would have, maybe he was still alive. He may have gone to a local pub and drank a lot of brews, but it's a good question you're asking. The answer to me is, of course, the data are there. I mean, we've got ethological data, comparative psychological data, neuroimaging, brain work that Marino has been doing, among others. So the reason I say that is when I read this article on Tuesday, it just came out, I was astounded that one of the conclusions is it's almost time to begin to rethink whether animals feel. I mean, that's the dumbest thing seriously, we read dumb things. It's the dumbest thing I've ever read. I do want to be clear, though, in the article, a number of scientists are quoted in very reliable ways. But this article, if you didn't know, could set back all the things that we've been doing and many people in the audience have been doing for decades. The science is clear without any whatever the smallest measurement we have now of a doubt. I'll just stop there because it's a waste of time to even discuss these articles. We should be working on what we know, not trying to debate people who are ignorant.
Yeah, that's something a lot of us animal advocates need to hear. You know, I mean, is there any place where there is dispute around this? Is there any area of animal behavior, animal cognition that there's any dispute? Lori, have you?
There is dispute. That doesn't mean it's valid dispute.
Right.
But the thing is, it's clear there isn't a debate anymore about that. If you really look at the data, and the people that are trying to keep this in the debate arena are the people who can it's to their advantage to keep people guessing about whether or not other animals, fill in the blank, have feelings. But when you really look at the science and you look at the data, it's perfectly clear.
Yeah, it's like maybe they're taking a page from the Trump book, just put as much misinformation out there and just hope it confuses people. And could that be a little bit of what's happening?
Let me just say
Too much
that
credit.
the only real question about sentience, I think that is a very fascinating area of discussion, is where do we draw the line? But as the great American philosopher Tom Reagan said, draw it in pencil, because new evidence is surfacing all the time. And it's so exciting to be a scientist and ethologist, because scientists are now asking really neat questions about what animals are thinking, what are they feeling. And lo and behold, there's discussion now about sentience in invertebrates, octopuses. It's widely accepted, the cephalopod mollusks and insects. Here's a little show and tell, a picture of parental care in an insect guarding her young. That's just a visual, but the research that's going on with these groups of animals is not always animal friendly, and I don't necessarily advocate it, but it's revealing things that would have been deemed fantasy just a generation ago.
Elena, how about you? What do you hear from naysayers? Because you're working with you're working with vets, you're hiring vets who are coming in, and they're coming in from certain perspectives, different backgrounds. Do you find that there is a reticence to even acknowledge that level of cognition or emotional life?
I think it depends on who and what industry one is in. I don't think there's any debate, if one looks at the science, as everyone has said, that animals think and feel and they're sentient. There is no debate, but I think some people do choose to ignore the science or not concern themselves with looking into the science. So yeah, there's a bit of a disconnect, but that doesn't mean there's really any debate about it. I mean, if you ignore it, what do you do?
Yeah, so the science is sound. Animals think and they feel. Okay, so let's figure out where we're ways. Speaking of who would dispute this, during the hearings around Ontario's ag bill, which passed, by the way, last year, a couple of years ago, actually, an animal ag industry lobby group called the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, OFA, put out a statement arguing that animals can't think or feel. Have you seen this in a lot of animal use industry, in validation of the capacity of the animals they're exploiting? I mean, Lori, let's start with you, because you're dealing probably with that, with animals that industries that are exploiting for entertainment.
Sure. I deal with the marine park industry all the time, the zoo and aquarium industry, and they're heavily invested in making sure that they hit the sweet spot. And the sweet spot is these animals are interesting and intelligent enough so that you pay X number of dollars a ticket, go through the turnstile and watch them on display, but they're not so intelligent that you have to worry about it. And you can sleep at night knowing that they're really happy to be there performing tricks in a tank for you. And so they try to walk that line, but you will never see things like dolphins are self-aware. Some of the really high level cognitive abilities that dolphins and whales have, you're not going to see that on SeaWorld's website. You're going to see stuff that just hits that middle ground, and that's where they want the public to stay. Ignorance.
Yes.
And Lori's use of the phrase debate area or debate arena is really poignant, because as long as you keep things in that shade of gray, it just retains the status quo.
That's
and
right.
In my field, as a field biologist, ethologist, people working for different organizations who harm wild animals will say, show us the data. And we show them the data, and then they say, show us the data. And most of them wouldn't know what data are if you just, put it right in their face. But there is a lot of purchase to get to be gotten by keeping things in the debate area. And also I'm an evolutionary biologist, I always tell people the real question is, why have emotions and sentience evolved, not if they have evolved. And I frankly think getting into debates with these people is an utter waste of time. But I can see the importance of it out in the real world. Maybe I don't live in the real world, but because there are people out there debating whether some non-human animals are persons, and they come up with all these ridiculous reasons why they're not.
And so so sorry, folks. I'm apparently having trouble with my internet, or I think it's the internet as opposed to Zoom. I'm not sure. But I have just hotspotted. So I don't know, Kirsten, is that working any better? Do you feel? Okay, great, awesome. Sorry about that. I have the highest speed of all time. Oh, wait a second. So Jonathan, how about you? Are there any particular industries that you just like shake your head at, like trying to do a fast one?
As the others have said, these industries are going to do their best to keep things in a big question mark and to defend their profits. If people are making money, they're going to do what they can to try and keep making money that way. I do want to mention, maybe this is more apropos the first question than the latest one, but there's a journal that I was part of the founding of in 2015 called Animal Sentience. And it's an online open access multidisciplinary journal. So it brings in contributions from all areas of academia, not just biology, but philosophy, et cetera. And the first year of that publication, we accepted and published a paper by a neuroscientist from Australia, Brian Key, arguing from a sort of a neuroscientist perspective that fish are not sentient, or fishes are not sentient. We did that in the interest of scholarship, and we didn't agree we don't think, the people running this journal don't think that fishes are not sentient, and neither did the people who responded, because the journal distinguishes itself by inviting commentaries, brief commentaries. And I think Laurie was one of the many commentators, and there were over 100 comments on that, commentaries published in the journal. Almost all of which were quite fiercely rebutting the specious arguments made by this guy. So I think it's really, I think there is a place for dialogue. I agree with what Marc said. We shouldn't spend too much time navel gazing about whether animals are sentient. Let's just keep pushing forward and showing that they're sentient and making that leverage into changes in policies and changes in attitudes. But I did want people here to be aware there is a journal called Animal Sentience, and you can go online anytime and check it all out because it's completely open access.
It's really good. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Can't hear you, Kimberly.
Kimberly, you're muted.
Kimberly, we can't hear you.
Kimberly, we can't hear you. Kimberly?
Unmuting? Can you hear me now, folks?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Oh my goodness. It figures 300 people on a Zoom, and that's when my everything acts up. How did you do without me? Did you carried on just fine? I see. Do you really need me? Can I just go for a beer now?
No.
No. Okay. Elena, I saw your hand up, and you don't need to put your hand up. You just jump right in there. What would you like to add?
I just wanted to say, at least say in the veterinary field or related fields, I agree with you all. Animals are sentient, yes, and whether or not some people even understand what that means, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I think there is a tendency, at least in my field, to think that certain animals don't feel as much, or they don't mind XYZ, saying, a pig doesn't mind being in whatever sow crate gestation, farrowing, crate, or stall, because that's just the way it is. And then, you know, well, they've been, you know, in these little confined environments for their whole life. And the same thing with, you know, cows. Oh, you know, they don't know any different. You can take across, you know, any animal that's in kind of a large production aspect. But so I think that's where some of the disconnect comes. I mean, sentience isn't even a discussion point among some, and it's just, you know, not acknowledging that animals feel and as much.
Convenient. It's right, Elena. It's convenient. It's
Yeah.
convenient when you make your money from exploiting animals. It's convenient when you're exploiting animals, and when it occupies your children. It's convenient to believe that and to basically take a person away from beings. So humans, you know, often are a supposed evolution supremacy to justify incredible cruelty to animals. What do you say to those who believe humans are the pinnacle of evolution? So, Jonathan, how about you? What do you say? Like, oh, well, we're the most evolved, so we can use whatever animals we can. Like, you know, we're holding all the chips.
Yeah, I think we are the pinnacle of evolution. We're the pinnacle of organisms who have things like war and pollution and enslavement and factory farming, and we've really distinguished ourselves. And I think a little humility would go a long way. You mentioned in your questions, you haven't asked the question yet, but I'll get a little ahead of myself here, a little bit ahead of the group, in saying that, you know, for examples of things that I admire about animals' capacities. One of my favorites is just their physical and sensory, but there's a bird called the godwit, and this bird migrates over the many thousands of miles in one flight. And it's a flight that lasts about 9 days, no food, no water, no stopping, no landing, over 1 million wing beats, just constantly going. And I just want to put that out there as just one of the things that an animal can do that leaves me just completely gobsmacked with admiration. And there's so many other examples that could be given. The Greenland shark, the current record holder among vertebrates for longevity. There's a Greenland shark swimming under the ice right now in the Arctic, who were probably born when Shakespeare was still writing his plays. And I just think, you know, what kind of patience that they must have, but also the wisdom they may have developed. There's many other examples the group could give, but I couldn't resist, you know, sharing just a couple of supreme examples of what animals are capable of doing.
Goodness, I love that. And let's keep going with that. I want to hear, you know, what are some of the ways that, you know, some animals leave us in the dust as far as evolution goes? Elena, you got anything for me? What about that lab rat that you have been working on studying so closely? Anything you can tell us about them?
Yes, but I actually will punt this over to the neuroscientists of the group who know firsthand all about rats and their complexities.
She's like, okay, Lori, give us something.
Okay. So first of all, this whole idea that there is a ladder or a scale or some linearity to this issue is just plain old wrong. It doesn't conform to anything in biology. So when you look at the life on Earth, there's no ladder with anybody on the top. So it doesn't matter who flies faster, who can do calculus, there's no ladder. It's just a branching tree. And even that is a little, we're starting to think about it in different ways. But so yes, there are many animals who have capacities that we don't have, vice versa. But it's really important to remember that this whole idea, this whole question started way before, but really was formalized by Aristotle long time ago, when we used to think that men were higher, more advanced than women, that priests were more advanced than bricklayers, etc. Everyone had their place in this scala natura. And it's just plain old wrong. And here we are in 2022, and we're still talking about it. And that's really I mean, there's a reason why. It's because we are on top. We put ourselves on top, but that's nothing but human vanity. There's nothing in biology that says humans, and there's nothing in the brain either that says humans are the most anything.
Yeah, Mark, I can't remember who said this, that really opened my eyes and said, as humans, we think we are at the pinnacle of evolution, and we're at the pinnacle of our human evolution, but the dolphin's at the pinnacle of dolphin evolution, and the mouse is at the pinnacle of mouse evolution. So is there any way that we can say there's a species that is more evolved than another?
I mean, I think if you look at, I'm not sure how to say it, but if you look at intelligence and actually the having of emotions as forms of adaptation, then no, I mean, I think that cross-species comparisons are meaningless because dogs do what they need to do to be cod-carrying dogs, as do various fishes and birds and insects and cetaceans. So it's just ridiculous because you can always find among a non-human a cognitive ability or even the expression of an emotion that you don't see in humans. It astounds me because as a biologist, when I talk to biologists about these vertical ladders where humans are above and apart from, not only above, but apart from, other animals, they go, well, you know what I mean. And, it's comparable to like the Animal Welfare Act in the United States, redefined the word animals to ignore or to exclude, not ignore, to exclude rats, mice, birds, and fishes, for example. And I've asked some people at meetings, and some get embarrassed because that's the dumbest thing in the world. These are PhDs in biology who know, if you will, that rats and mice are animals. They're surely not plants. I mean, but the reason I say that is that still happens today. And it is an expression of this misplaced, absurdly stupid human exceptionalism. And once again, this is an area I just can't even talk to people about because they go, yeah, we know it's wrong. And then they go into their lab and they cut animals up. And it's getting back to what Lori was saying. And I know everyone on the panel feels, I'm not sure about Elena, but I think you would, is that it's a good excuse. It opens a door for allowing you to do anything you want to these either non-animals who are animals or to these lower creatures. And then somebody I know hates the use of the word or the phrase lower and higher animals, but he subscribes to the Animal Welfare Act. And if I didn't know that he was really brilliant, I just think he'd be one of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life. But it allows him to go parade around and torture animals and then and do boring, useless paradigm science. Sorry, I mean, you can tell that I've had it with this. I mean, this article on Tuesday just really got to me. And I'm getting emails about it and I'm telling people don't read it. It's just use it for fire.
We don't our blood pressure to go up as a movement.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so let's talk about this identification, because that's what allows us to divide animals at some random line, how species identify. And I'll give humans a break. Species that has identification, that values their own species that are more like them. So it's pretty easy to help people appreciate maybe the cognitive capacity of animals they identify with that are closer to them, like monkeys or dogs. But what about marine life and amphibians? And the very unpopular animals like rats and snakes. I mean, nobody wants to hang out with them. So do you see this? How do we get over this problem of identification? and how do we get them to connect with these animals that they can't identify with? Jonathan, any ideas there?
Sure. I like to cite studies that and observations that surprise people and go against the assumptions that people have had. I mean, obviously, researching and writing a book about fishes was partly an exercise in that, and it was such an exciting project because there really is great research. There's really great findings out there, and it's a joy to kind of be a mouthpiece for the fishes and bring those things to light. So, I like to just share things with people that I think are a bit surprising. In the case of snakes, reptiles, snakes are one of the most reviled of all vertebrate animals, and yet exquisite, beautiful creatures, beautifully adapted to their way of life and very successful despite our depredations on them. Rattlesnakes have been found to have social lives, and they have lifelong friendships that they form. That, of course, requires individual recognition and memory, which are basic cognitive abilities that we shouldn't be surprised about, but people have often not even thought about whether they have that, never mind believe that they did. One of the cool things they do, kind of a virtuous example, Marc's written a lot about animal virtue. It's a great area because people can relate. Nannying and babysitting is something that's been observed in rattlesnakes. While some mothers go out to forage, there's another mother will stay behind and look after their children, their baby snakes, as well as their own. And then, of course, that's probably reciprocal. It gets traded off. One good deed today will be returned next week, say. So I think it's not one of the things we can do as biologists, certainly in my field of ethology, is to share and make light of the remarkable capacities of animals. And as this information accumulates, I kind of think those who deny it run a risk of looking more and more kooky. I mean, there's still flat earthers out there, and they're not really given much credibility these days, as they shouldn't be. By analogy, let's hope, and I do think that it's becoming more and more of a strain for people to deny that animals are sentient and that they do really neat things that are meaningful to them in their lives.
Anybody want to add to that and the animals that we identify with less as humans?
Yeah, I have a theory, which I'm sure is shared by y'all. I think there's a disconnect, kind of like the tree lost in the forest. I kind of think maybe a little bit of the reason for some people is that there's not an individual relationship with an animal. So there's kind of a disconnect between a person's idea of a group of animals to which the animal belongs, like a flock of birds, or research rats, or whatever, any sort of like group of animals, research dogs, and food animal. That's my favorite, food animal. I mean, it's like anyway. And so I think when society assigns animals into this strange group and categorizes them, we kind of discount them. And I think it's just ingrained in our heads. And so even because, we talk about these people, the science is there. It's like, what are you talking about? This pig is like, I don't know, this is, you shouldn't make comparisons between smartness or whatever, but just say, for example, this pig is smarter than your child. But still, that doesn't mean anything to most people, because they're still going to go eat their bacon. And it's just I feel like there's this ingrained group mentality that these are just categories of things for us, and people don't identify with them as individuals. Something I do, blah blah too much. Something I do with the vet students, which I think was hugely successful, is we have chickens, and I love our chickens, and I took them out there to get to know the chickens as individuals, and they had to go and write about all the behaviors that the chickens were doing, and I think or else they told me anyway, that it gave them a better understanding of the chickens and a better appreciation. And I mean, maybe they're just telling that to me, but I don't know. I just feel like that individual experience, I don't know, it's just missing in so much of our society.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important. I think it's necessary, but not sufficient, because there are lots of
okay,
people
yeah.
who spend time with animals and then they go and order them in the restaurant as well.
True.
So there's
Totally.
something else, there's something
Yeah, yeah.
in that equation, right? That
Mhm.
needs to be.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
Jonathan, I don't know if he's the first person, but certainly made the point on his work on fish that they should be called fishes. And I always quote correct people, because you talk about mammals, not mammal. You talk about birds, not bird. But people talk about fish as if they're all the same, and there's more variety, more variation among fishes than probably, maybe except many insects. But I think that was a really important, I don't think it was a really important point that Jonathan made, because all the research shows it's not like you've seen one fish, you've seen them all. And they have varying personalities. They respond differently to, environmental stimuli and all that. But I think meeting individuals, I always use dogs, as I call them, like a gateway species to bridge the empathy gap. I bring it home. So when people get hot, I don't get hot because it's just not my style. I'll just say, oh, do you have a dog? Uh-huh. Does your dog like playing? Uh-huh. Does your dog miss you? Uh-huh. Does your dog love other dogs? Uh-huh. Well, what about cows and pigs who you eat? Or what about the dogs in the lab who you maim and torture? And but that's all I say, because dogs are mammals. I mean, most of the people in this audience know that dogs are mammals. I'm sure you all know, but it's this cognitive dissonance that also they somehow overcome. I don't know how. I've had conversations with people since I was in a biology department, and finally they didn't want to talk to me and I didn't want to talk to them. We mutually coexisted, but I'd have students come and say, so-and-so told me about his dog at home, how he loves to play and how he misses him. And then he's supporting all this research on torturing mice and rats and, other mammals. I'll stick to mammals now. I don't know how they do it. I mean, I really don't. Early in my career, I was faced with that, and I left the program because I just couldn't manage it. And I don't mean that in a self-serving way, but I don't know how they do it.
Well, and I really want to be able to pick up on that point and just hit it home because this is something we teach in Animal Justice Academy, the importance of language in this movement. And so, using words like fishes and deers, and people will think it's grammatically incorrect, but the way we speak informs the way we think, and so it very much influences the way and the paradigms we think in. So I want to, we've got a whole crew of animal advocates here dealing with people who downplay the capacities of animals, the inner lives of animals. So I just want to do a couple of rounds here of some facts or information you like to hit folks with that you found really effective, okay? And it can be around intelligence, it can be around emotion, it can be around bonding, it can be anything. So yeah, let's just Lori, what are some of the things that you say that can really kind of hit it home for people?
Well, I think a lot of people think and are invested in thinking that farmed animals don't have feelings about anything and don't really care what happens to them, etc. And through my work with the Someone Project, where I looked at all the science of what we know about cows and pigs and chickens, goats, sheep, etc., I found that there's an enormous amount of data of science telling us that these animals do indeed care. They care about good things that happen to them. They care about bad things that happen to them. For instance, chickens. A lot of people think, what does the chicken care about her eggs or her chicks? But in fact, there are studies that show that hens get upset if they see that somebody is upsetting their chicks. Who among us cannot relate to that? And these kinds of studies are out there. So yes, hens do care about what happens to their chicks. That's one example of the kind of thing that, most people don't even know about.
Lori, I remember many years ago hearing about how hens, when they are on their eggs, will actually sing to their babies in the eggs, and the little ones in the eggs actually chirp back. And that blew me away. And I promptly put that on a poster campaign and got it all out there, because those are the things that make you, when people are digging into their, $10 mini chicken, make them pause and think, oh my God. Once you hear that, you can't get it out of your brain.
No. So, I mean, chickens do care about what happens to themselves and what happens to others around them, including their chicks.
Jonathan, what are a few things that you pull out that are just like, you just see people's kind of jaw drop?
I'll give a couple of examples from the world of fishes, since they've been part of the discussion, which is so great, because if we had this webinar, if we could have a generation ago, they probably wouldn't have been included much. The cleaner client mutualism on reefs is such a fascinating thing. It's been well studied. There's probably 150, 200 papers or more published on them. And this is a phenomenon whereby one or two or three or a small group of cleaner wrasses, small little stripy fish, incredibly intelligent. Recent studies show they have mirror self-recognition. They set up shop in the same place on the reef each day, and the so-called client fish of more than 100 species swim along and wait their turn to be serviced by these cleaners. And the client swims in. It could be a predator, it could be a shark or pufferfish, but they open their mouth and the cleaner fishes swim in and out of the mouth, and the gill covers with impunity, because it's not a good idea to eat your business partner. That sort of is a kind of a business relationship. And these fishes know each other as individuals, and they know when a client has been quite recently visited. By the way, the cleaners are removing parasites and other undesirables from the skin of the clients. So the cleaners get food and the clients get a parasite removal service and a spa treatment. But it gets Machiavellian, and that's not my word. That one of the leaders of research in this area used that word. He wrote an article about the Machiavellian intelligence of fishes. And sometimes the cleaners take more than they should. They bite a little bit of mucus, that nice slimy little layer. It's very nutritious and tasty for them, apparently. I haven't tried it myself. And that annoys the clients, that they may jolt. Of course, people who eat fish are probably eating lots of that slime. They may just not be aware of it. But the clients are unhappy. And the study showed the cleaners do a better job if there's a lot of clients in the row, in the queue, probably because their eBay ratings are going to suffer less if they do a good job. But they will mollify clients. An annoyed client, they flutter their pectoral fins. And that in itself is amazing. There's a study of surgeon fishes that was published, which showed that they will actually seek out a massage. They will seek out a gentle stroking touch, and it lowers their stress. And stressed surgeon fishes that don't have that opportunity, they will ignore the stimulus that was. I'm sort of, that's too much to explain in a short webinar. But suffice to say that fishes can, and I suspect the surgeonfish is representative of many other fish. That's what we need to remember about these studies. Yeah, the species are all different, but a phenomenon as basic as getting stress relief by being petted or stroked or caressed probably applies, if a fish is capable of that, that probably applies broadly to other fish, and there's lots of evidence to support that. So that's probably a bit long-winded an example, but I could give an example with cod too, fishes that are eaten.
Yeah, tell us, give us a little.
I was just going to say they too have their amazing abilities. There was a study where cod had a little plastic tag on the back of their fin placed there too, so the scientists could identify them. And they would, just the way they fed the fish says a lot about how we understand how smart these creatures are. The fish, to feed themselves, had to swim up to a little string and pull the loop, and it would cause a food pellet to drop. And of course, fishes are smart, alert, aware, and quick. And sometimes the one who pulled the loop wouldn't be the first one to get to the food. So a few of them discovered, probably by accident, that if they swam through the loop, that it would catch on the tag, and it would pull the tag, and they could get to the food a little bit faster. And so it was like an innovation, and those smart cod who figured that out used that to get more food. It's considered an example of innovation and problem solving by a cod. So I wanted to give the cod a little bit of credit there.
Yeah, shout out to the cod.
Maybe I should say cods.
Cods, thank you. Yes, yes. Marc, you talked about studies around virtue. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll give you a few examples first. I mean, the virtue and moral, say animals being virtuous and moral, having some moral sense, comes from a lot of the work that I've done on play behavior, where they announce they want to play, and if they cheat, they'll pay for it. So one good example I was going to give in our long-term study of field study of coyotes in Wyoming, turned out that animals who cheated in play, they invited another animal to play but didn't play, left the group as youngsters, not because they were driven out, but because other coyotes wouldn't play with them or would avoid them. And the animals who dispersed early in life suffered a lot higher mortality. So from an evolutionary point of view, you could argue there'd be selection for being honest and, if you will, moral. I invite you to play. I'm going to play with you. I'm not going to try to beat you up. Another example I was going to give from that study was when animals in the field, animals disappear, and unless you find the corpse, you don't know if they died. And I say that because some people write about an animal who left a group as being dead. And I can tell you that some of the coyotes we studied and some of the wolves I've watched, they leave the group and they may not come back for 2 years, but they haven't died. But this whole grieving ceremony that a family went through, there was a husband and a wife coyote and their children. And I use those words because words count. They have husbands, they have wives, and biologists call them offspring. You know, they'll call them the young or the offspring. I call them children, and I finally got a journal to accept the fact that bears and coyotes and wolves and fishes, by the way, Jonathan, they have children. And when you use the word children, all of a sudden you feel that bond. It's not their offspring or the young of the year. This family of coyotes just completely dissolved. They didn't know what to do when mom left. And like I said, we don't know if she died or whether she disappeared. So for about 5 days, they grieved, they roamed all around, they didn't eat. But finally, they went back to work. And somebody said, well, they maybe didn't care. No, they cared a lot. It's just in the wild, they couldn't spend their time grieving because they had to hunt and defend an area and get food. Other stories, you know, do animals love? Well, I mean, on that hierarchy, I think humans might be the weakest of all the species. You know, don't get between a mommy bear and her children. And I really mean that. And people will go, oh, we don't know what's love. And I always say, oh, I feel sorry for you that you don't know whether these animals love one another. You know, you could define love in humans and you can apply the same criteria. Just a couple of other examples. I studied penguins in Antarctica, and there were 250,000 penguins on this rookery. These animals come out of the water. Some are torn apart by killer whales and leopard seals. They'll run a mile uphill faster than any human I know and beeline right to their nest. There's vocal recognition. I mean, somebody asked me if I could do it. And I said, yeah, I learned the identity of a few penguins out there because one was missing a flipper. I mean, I'm being facetious, but they recognize one another and they don't waste time, they don't waste time trying to find their mate. They steal stones from one another. They make these little stone nests. If you took a film of that and then you superimposed a human on it, there's no other interpretation than they know they're being watched. They know they're being sneaky, and they'll wait, they'll go back, they'll wait. And as soon as another penguin turns around and avoids seeing them, they steal the stone. I mean, and you know, there's just so many. I observed a magpie funeral once. I was riding my bike back into Boulder and there was a carcass in the road. and there were 4 magpies around the carcass. Just basically, you can't, I mean, if you watch them, you'd know that they were going, you know, what's going on? I thought they were grieving. Then slowly but surely, one bird left and brought back pine needles and twigs and put it by the carcass. So I was with my friend Rod, who doesn't know anything about this. And I said to him, you saw that. I was verifying it because maybe I would be prone to embellish what they were doing. About a year later, I got a video from a woman in Canada with this showing the exact same thing. So do magpies grieve? Do they have funerals? Well, John Marslov would argue that they do, and you know, that corvids do. So there's this whole string and this wide array of emotions that these animals feel. The only way to really explain their behavior with any reliability is to grant them their highly evolved and adaptive cognitive and emotional capacities. I mean, stealing them from these individuals, just stealing them is just useless. And I'll give you one more example because it's a hot one. Rick McIntyre studies wolves in Yellowstone, and his 4th book is coming out about the importance of females in wolf social structure. No surprise to anybody who studied carnivores. And there's another book coming out called Bitch, and it's by a wonderful woman in the UK whose name I miss. I'm not recalling, but the reason I'm telling you that is one paradigm shift that's going to happen in this field of ethology, and it's happening right now, is not only are we going to do away with these ridiculous hierarchies and these scala naturae that maybe they had some credence among Neanderthals. I mean, I don't know. I expect Neanderthals knew more about animals than we do now, but showing how important it is to focus on females in these large social groups. And I'm saying that because we're not going to understand the social dynamics of these groups unless we understand the incredibly important and central role of women in these societies.
Here.
Here. I knew you'd like that.
Yeah.
No, it's critical. I mean, it really is. Bonobos, who people know, is such a female-oriented society. But there's so many examples out there. It's incredible.
Thank you, Mark. Lori, we lost you for a bit. We're so happy to have you back. Can you hear us, Lori? Oh, Lori can't actually hear us. Kirsten, maybe you can try sending a message to Lori just to let her know. Yeah. Can you hear us, Lori? No? Okay. Well, Kirsten will work on the back end to get Lori. Elena, are any things that you find, like, especially with your vet students or anything that you're like, you got to know this. This is something I'm going to drop a little info bomb on you.
I think all of the things that you all are discussing, the examples from Jonathan, Mark, and Lori, I think those are hugely important to know, like the amazing behaviors and just the amazing cognitive abilities, and to relate, the animals to what we all know. And then after that, I think it's really important then to say, but look at the situations that they're in. And in terms of veterinarians, we're supposed to, care for the health of the animal, which includes their welfare and their mental health as well. And so I think it's really important that after you show, look at these amazing, non-human animals, but then this is the situation. This is where they are, and these are the habitats they're kept in. This is, fish, aquaculture. Unfortunately, I don't touch upon that in my class, but that's a huge, anyway. So to have all the positives, and then also, unfortunately, to bring in the negative, just the atrocities, because I think that then makes a nice picture for those who do want to do something about it. There are some people who still just don't care, but those people, you have to put them away.
Yeah. as Mark says, we don't spend time on those people. We spend time on the
Exactly.
people that actually look like and feel like they're ready to shift. And in those moments, you're saying, not only showing the hidden life that we never considered about animals, but then really bringing into perspective what we're subjecting them to. So
Yeah, I think, and I'm sorry, just quite honestly, I was a late bloomer to the field. I even went to vet school late. I mean, all of this late. I changed careers all the time. So anyway, but I actually did. I was an animal lover. My boyfriend, then husband, when I went to vet school, was a vegetarian. I thought I was like an ethical eater, whatever. And I actually didn't learn about the amazing capacities of animals and also the horrors until vet school. And then I was like, which is usually the opposite happens in vet school. But for me, I mean, I was just like, oh my goodness. So I think, with the right audience, it when you learn everything, it can hit them in the right way.
Folks, sorry, I got kicked out and I'm back. But
we're so glad you're here, Lori. We're still in the same question, so you didn't miss anything. I mean, it's a bunch of beautiful, illustrations of how amazing non-human animals are. But thank you. I was panicking. This has been the most tech challenging panel yet, because there's people, including me, dropping in and out, and I'm trying to listen and text Kirsten at the same time. So, luckily, every word that you say is potent and it is sinking in. So, okay, I want to go to some audience questions, some community questions, folks. Pure Ravine is asking, I would be curious about the sentience of mussels, scallops, clams, oysters, and your thoughts on that. Any recent science to clarify their sentience level? So I know this is bivalves is a place where they're in, even as in the vegan community, there's some debate as to, well, do they have any more sentience than a plant? So anybody can throw us a little bit of info on that?
yeah.
The mollusks, and mollusks include the cephalopods, which are the most highly regarded in terms of sentience. Octopuses and squids and nautiluses, those are in the same phylum. Of course, octopuses and squids don't have a sessile adulthood where they're kind of in one place, which, the sort of the understanding is it's from an evolutionary standpoint, pain is useful because it allows you to move away from bad stuff. If an animal or an organism can't move, then perhaps pain, the capacity to feel pain, say, is less of a priority. And I say less because it doesn't mean it's absent necessarily. And I think we ought to, as a good principle, give the benefit of the doubt where there is doubt. And I have no desire to eat mollusks any more than I do pigs or chickens.
Yeah. And there are some scallops that actually move away from noxious stimuli. So, as Jonathan said, I think benefit of the doubt, there's still a nervous system there, and therefore, there's the capacity for feeling all kinds of things, including pain in many ways.
Yeah, and a lot comes down to how we define these terms too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if in n number of years we discover that we're so myopic that pain, I mean, this is nothing new, but pain has so many different dimensions. I mean, what always interests me about these debates is, to me, it's a big deal. I mean, would I like to know whether shrimps and, various other animals for whom we're not sure about their being sentient, would I like to know if they are? And yeah, I would, but from a practical point of view, they're alive. And so, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I think it's an important discussion to have. They're alive. So that's why we shouldn't be eating and harming them. Somebody will say, well, they don't really care about themselves. Well, we don't know that, but they're alive. And I think that's a really compelling argument that we shouldn't be killing other animals regardless. I mean, is it okay to kill a human being or another animal who has lost their feeling or has checked out? I mean, my mom checked out in many different ways. And We don't know what she felt or thought, if anything, to be honest, at the end of her life, but that didn't give us permission to do whatever we wanted to her. But I think from a biological point of view, the science of, say, I'll call it cognitive ethology, animal emotion, sentience, cognition, whatever you want to throw into that cognitive ethological pot, we're learning things every day. So why should we close the door on pain, suffering, and sentience when we don't even have a good idea about what it means in animals with whom we're really familiar? And I'm not trying to lead us into these philosophical, cubby holes, because I don't find those discussions to be particularly useful. Do I think mammals are sentient? I do. I mean, I'm not drawing the line there, but the reason I'm saying that is I don't need to ponder whether dogs are conscious. I know people do, and that's wonderful. I don't need to ponder whether dogs like to play. I think they do. And if you don't think they do, that's fine. But I don't think we should be making these taxonomic decisions based on distance, if you will. I know we touched this before. I mean, Jonathan's work on fishes, his book on flies. I mean, after I read his book, I started naming the flies around my house. I always name spiders because it's fun. I don't know if they're the same spider or the same fly. And there's a Rolling Stones song that I love, The Spider and the Fly. But what it did to me, and what it did to some people who came over for dinner one night, who, besides the fact that they wanted to call the psychiatric unit in Boulder, was I said, oh, there's Sarah, there's Mary, oh, there's Harry, there's Jonathan. And they looked around at one another. I had not been drinking. I hadn't been imbibing anything else. But the reason I did it was I wanted them to start thinking about these beings as named individuals. And the moral of the story, as we know, and people in the audience know, is the minute we named them, regardless of whether we could identify them as individuals, people started saying, oh my goodness, the next time I see a spider or a fly, I'm going to have to shoo it out of my house rather than smack it.
Well, also, when you look at the neurology of these animals, right? I mean, a spider, a fly, all insects, they have very complex brains.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about, animals who have brains that have different components. And some of those components actually work in a similar way to the way vertebrate and mammal brains work. So, as somebody who studies brains and brain evolution, you see continuity across insects and non-insects. They've got the goods, the neurological goods, to have cognition, to feel things, and you can do a lot with the kinds of brains that they have. They're complex. They're not simple.
Melissa Bateson's work on depressed bees. I mean, when I started talking about that, people thought I was whacked. And no, bees get depressed.
Believable.
As Ernst Junger said, there are as many organs in a fly as there are in a leviathan.
Who said that?
Ernst Junger, I believe, is the name. Junger. I mean, flies learn faster when they're hungry. I mean, that's motivation. Fruit fly males actually tend to consume more alcohol if they've been rejected by females. That sounds kind of human-like. But it says that this is a complex being that who responds differently depending on the situation. There's many other examples of that. But I mean, insects look at them. They're so complex. And I love the idea of naming them. I mean, that brings you closer to them. When I rescue an insect too, from now I'm going to name in the process of rescuing them. I let them go outside. I feel like I'm liberating a bit of my soul in addition to the insect. It feels good to do a good deed.
Well, you are liberating them. They stop fighting against the damn window. They want to fly. I know people would say, how do you know that? But I think your examples, Jonathan, are absolutely salient. If you described that and you said it was a chimpanzee, people would talk about motivation, learning, cognition, feelings. We got a long way to go, and I hope there's a lot of students in the gallery here who are going to do these studies, and I would love to hear from them anyway. But really, we have so much to learn. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of chat going on around the idea that how does acknowledging sentience of animals actually help them? The UK, this is Verena saying the UK has recently declared that animals are sentient, but so what? Will
Yeah.
fewer of them be eaten as a result? And I'll just add one more thing, and that is, Olma said, why focus on whether animals think or feel? Should we be focusing on the fact that they suffer? That's more evident and deniable. So anyway, any sort of thoughts about those comments?
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
To that? Yeah. I wrote this paper. Spain recently declared animals to be sentient, but that bullfighting still occurs. New Zealand was one of the first countries who declared animals to be sentient, and they're murdering thousands of animals a day using the most heinous methods in their war on wildlife. So does it make a difference? What I'm hoping is, and I do a lot of work with Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots groups. I'm hoping kids will pick up that inconsistency, and I really mean it. I mean, no, from a practical point of view, the countries and cities who have declared animals to be sentient has made no practical on the ground difference. But if kids pick it up, I love when kids say to adults, well, if they're sentient, why do you kill them and harm them? And then the adults go into this long, ridiculous they avoid the question, saying, you'll learn when you grow up. And I love when kids say, I am grown up and I'm asking a question.
I have to, say that I totally agree with Mark. I really have a problem with these declarations, I think they help people more than they help the other animals. You look at the Declaration on Animal Sentience. How many of those people that signed that declaration went back to their labs and did invasive work with the animals, or kept animals in tanks and cages?
Yeah.
I mean, this is ridiculous. And even I myself, I went to Helsinki many years ago and helped create the universal rights for cetaceans with a bunch of people. Nothing ever came of it. It just sits there. It has no teeth, no legality. And people look at it and say, well, okay, I guess we're done. And it doesn't do anything, really. I mean, the proof is really in eating the pudding. And if that's the case, these declarations are really quite empty. They're empty promises. They're I don't know what they are, but I'm not a fan.
They're feel good.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally
signaling.
Humane washing. Oh, I feel so good about myself that I've declared these animals to be sentient. Let's go eat or wear them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, give me a break. Sorry.
Elena, jump in there.
Okay. So I agree, like directly, they don't do much, right? I mean, it's not like we've made this declaration, now the world will change, or our country will change, or even our county will change. But I think that all of these little pieces do make a difference. I think there is a huge difference. Speaking from the veterinary community, I only went to vet school. I started in 2009, so it's only been like 10 to 15 years since I graduated. I think there's a big difference between the people who are in my vet school class versus now, the students I'm teaching now. I think every little bit helps. And I think there's more and more awareness, even if you have these big declarations that are just, well, yay. I think it matters to the young, to the generation, maybe not us, but the older generation, but all of the ones coming up. I think that's what I think.
Well, and it's something for the legal community to hang our hats on, right? It's something for us to be able to say, hey.
Problem. I mean, I think that is the problem. Most of these things don't have any teeth. So you can hang your hat on it, but your hat's going to fall on the floor. So
it might be
you
something
know,
to build on, but yeah, you can't hang your hat on.
right.
It's-
And my point is that this could be opportunity loss. So while everyone is
Right.
happy about declaring rights for this one and consciousness for that one, we forget that that's not the work. That's not the work. The work that Elena describes in this progress, that's not it, the declaration. It's on the ground, actual work.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Elena, I agree with cumulative change, and I agree that change, things change incrementally. I'm out of patience. I'm out of the BS. I am. But because it's like this article on Tuesday, I'm tired of hearing colleagues over 50 years say the same thing today as they said 50 years ago. We need to do better. I had an email from a young girl in the UK, actually. I think she's 13. And she basically said, don't you all get tired of saying the same thing over and over again? She wasn't being there. And she said, I'm not being nasty. She said, don't you get, and she didn't mean me personally, I hope, but she said, don't you get tired of saying we need to treat animals better? Don't you get tired of saying we need to treat the world better? Yeah, I'm tired. I am over it. I'm over the hypocrisy and the slowness of movement, because we need to do better. And that's why I really meant whoever's in the audience here and whoever listens to this and Lori and I were on an unbelievably stimulating law discussion a few months ago. And we went off a little ballistic, which I think we need to do. We need to blank or get off the blank. It's over. No more debates about are animals sentient. No more debates about we need to do better. We need to do better. And Jane Goodall talks so poignantly about we're stealing the future of young generations. I can't imagine what the world's going to be like in 30 years, 40 years, 20 years. And I'm an optimist. No, I mean, seriously. So the time's to act. We don't need any more debates about who's conscious or who's sentient. We need to act.
Yeah. And so where would we start with that, Marc? Where everybody's with you. And so where do we focus? So is it about, really bringing this, information, really like bringing this to the younger generations? Do we just forget about the older generations?
No.
Marc, Jonathan?
Don't you dare.
Yeah, we're members of that generation.
Yeah. Well, I think Marc just like tossed you out of the committee.
No, I mean, I think we start with younger generations. We start talking with people who really want to change. We put the information out in popular media. We put the information out locally. I love the act locally, think globally. And we don't entertain and work against people who are on the other side. I always tell people we're working for the animals, not against people. I mean, I'm sure everyone on this panel gets emails full of expletives. Maybe I'm the only one who gets many of them. No, I'm sure Lori, I'm sure you'll get them. I don't answer them. And then you get an email back saying, did you get my email? And I don't answer them. And then, but the point I'm trying to make is I want to put my energy into working for the animals with the assumption and underlying ground rules that it doesn't matter if they're sentient or conscious, although we know that billions of animals are. The ground rule is we need to do better. And we have to stop the useless talk about, well, there's this article recently about pig vocalizations. So I went back, I found an identical article written 50 years ago. Who really cares whether the squeals of pigs mean they're in this degree of pain or that degree of pain? I don't care. They're in pain. When you castrate a pig or you rip their teeth out or cut their tails, they're in pain.
I think more people
I'll
are
shut
paying
up.
attention.
I really had it. I'm just over it.
I think more people are paying attention though than 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so the question I want to ask, because we only have a couple of precious minutes left, is as animal, you've got right now almost 300 animal advocates here, okay, and many more watching the replay. Are there some tips or rules of thumb for animal advocates here who are trying to help people understand, to break through the us and them sort of paradigm, that to help them understand the complexities and depths of all animals' experiences? Anybody got some? Jonathan.
Let me just throw a statistic out. It's the most sobering statistic I've seen in a long time. And that is that, I don't know who did the math, but currently humans and livestock make up about 96% of all the vertebrate animals on Earth, all the mammals on Earth, or all the vertebrate animals on Earth. I believe that's not counting fishes, but that's, to me, you know, that leaves 4% that are actually wild animals. The other thing I wanted to just say is that, and this speaks to that, the livestock piece, that's about what humans eat. And I think if we can provide that applied nature to what we're discussing, you know, we can talk about the scientific studies, but let's also apply it to what can one do with this information? Well, think about what you eat, because it's very personal. It's a daily decision people make. And so I always try to include that context, the applied aspect of this. What do you eat? And that's a choice. You have the power of choice, and you also have the power of not giving money to industries that do things that you don't want them to do to animals. And that's empowering. We all need to be aware that every individual can make a difference.
And what about when we are still talking to people that are, you know, just haven't made that connection, haven't been able to have a personal experience with a species of animals that they're exploiting? You know, any ideas on how to connect the dots for them? And I mean, it's important. I mean, we need to do that work, because at the end of the day, our emotions drive our decisions, right?
Well, maybe go back to dogs. I mean, I was going to say that I said it before, I bring it home to dogs. You live with a dog, you know, people used to criticize me for all the work I did in China, because they'd say, how can you go to China? That's where they eat dogs and cats. And they go, God, I just left Boulder, Colorado, where they eat pigs and chickens and cows. But I said it nicely. I think one strategy for dealing with people who disagree with you is always be patient and polite, be kind, don't fight with them. Because the minute they get on the defensive, you might as well go home. I mean, you know, you're done. And listen to them. And the work that I do with prisoners who vary from mild pickpockets to murderers is you disarm them. And I don't mean that in a disingenuous way. I mean, you do it by saying, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from people with whom I disagree, or obviously disagree with me. Preaching to the converted doesn't get you very far, except I think Elena is exactly right, is we need to preach to the converted and show them what we know, or tell them about, you know, new discoveries. But be polite. It really disarms people when they get in your face and you just don't respond. I mean, it does. And you go, you respect me, I'll respect you. So I think matter of presentation is critical. And to me, the final thing I'll say is know when to just stop. I mean, no one's going to convince me to eat a cow. I'm not going to, may not convince somebody not to, and just say thank you and move on. We really, you got to deal with larger numbers of people who are willing to change.
You know, folks, I want to end this on a more, again, a more emotional level. I think that's an important place to keep coming to. Does anyone or one or two of you want to share a story that you've told that really hits home the sort of emotional lives of animals? Anybody got something that they want to share? Something that's either happened to them or they've heard of?
I got a quick fish one. Who would have guessed? One of the people I corresponded with when I was researching my book, What a Fish Knows, was a woman in Florida who I'd known through email correspondence. And she described her relationship with Jasper, who was a blue discus fish. Now, I'm not advocating keeping fishes in aquariums. We shouldn't do that. But she had Jasper. As far as I know, Jasper may have lived alone in that tank. Poor Jasper. She would get home from work. It became a daily routine. And she would say hi to Jasper, and Jasper would swim over. And then she would put her hands in the water, and she would cup her hands in the water, and Jasper would swim in to her hands and lie on his side, and she would pet him gently with her thumb. And by the way, you can watch videos of that similar type interactions on YouTube today. People can see it for themselves. So that just speaks to me to a connection. We can bridge that connection across divides that used to be considered so huge, and actually we can connect emotionally and physically with another animal.
Mm-hmm.
And we, all are recognized and have had the privilege of learning some of these things that have woken us up to the idea that, a dog is a pig is a boy, and so for us to be able to, have our little sort of arsenal of those stories that really influenced us. And to be able to, look at that person and go, okay, well, this is something that they can appreciate. They're a caring, compassionate person with their children, with their cat, with their dog. They're going to love this. And you can actually phrase it in that way. I know how much you love animals. Let me tell you about this. So, yeah.
I like that. I mean, and I know this sounds fluffy, and people who live in Boulder can be fluffy and crystal thinking or seeking. Follow your dreams in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know people think that that's just a load of junk, but the world is in a state today where if we don't follow our dreams in our hearts, meaning in a positive way, obviously not what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, follow them. Because as you get older, you're going to wish that you followed them and did the things you want to do. Don't get trapped into doing things early on, because that's what happened to me when I was in a PhD, MD program. I left it. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing what they were doing in those labs. And that's what's going to happen. So I just think we should support and reinforce deeply youngsters following their dreams and following their hearts, and not being labeled sissies or softies. I really mean that. I see that a lot among elementary schools, where kids cry over the loss of a mouse and somebody in the class just says, grow up, usually, or be a man. And I'm thinking, oh shit, this is really bad news. Draft them. No, anyway, go ahead.
Lori, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Well, I just wanted to add that don't, what Mark says, but don't let anyone tell you what you can and cannot be.
Yep.
And as a neuroscientist, I've been steeped in the lab, community. I've taught students for 20 years who were told, go ahead and, kill that animal or sacrifice that animal and all this stuff. And I don't want to hear peep out of you. And so I want students to know that nobody should tell you that you can't be a scientist and an animal advocate. And don't let anybody drum you out of the business.
Yep.
If you want to be a scientist and you want to do things your way and make changes, you have every right to be there. And that's extremely important.
Yep.
Stay in and make the change. Don't let anybody tell you to get out.
That's perfect, Lori. I mean, I couldn't agree more, having been in departments where they torture animals. Just, yep. They'll say you have to do this. They get into this paradigm science that their mentor did. And don't let it. That's so good, Lori. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, really.
Like, honestly, we have so many questions and there's such good ones. This was such a great gathering of people in the community, really smart folks, so much great discussion. I wish we had another 2 hours for this to go through, but I know that your time is valuable. You've got a world to convince that we need to consider animals like our fellow brothers and sisters on this globe. So I just want, Kirsten, if you can take us off spotlight, so you can see your adoring supporters out here, folks. Just make sure you, our panelists, just go back to your corner view and go to gallery view so that you can see everybody, okay? And just so you know, we had almost 300 people at one point, and there's 8 pages of people right now, 8 pages, okay? And so I just really want to thank Marc, I want to thank Lori, I want to thank Jonathan and Elena, who we lost somewhere along the way, but she's here, I just want to thank you all, and Animal Justice Academy folks. Oh, I see her, she's right in the middle. AJers, can we please give them a great big AJ? Thank you. Thank you for the amazing work that you put out into the world. It is truly breathtaking. And folks, if you want to stay for a discussion period, I know some of you want to get into some real detailed stuff. We're going to do a half hour just immediately following this. Just stay on when everybody else is going, stay on. And if you aren't going to stay, get off, okay? But before we do that, thank you so much for joining us in Animal Justice Academy. You can join us if you haven't officially at animaljusticeacademy.com. Folks, it was just really heartening to have all of you that care so deeply about animals gathered here tonight. So thank you. And thank you to our panelists.
Thank
have
you
a
all.
wonderful night.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.